Forrest Olaf Peterson is my guest here on Community. He's a PhD.
There we go. All right, Anthony, what we're gonna do is we're gonna play a video real quick, and we'll try and see if we can get the video figured out here. Okay. So this is Josue.
Candidate at Stanford University, and he's researching wage theft. Forrest Olaf Peterson is my guest here on Comunidad. Welcome to the show. Thank you very much. So we're talking about wage theft, in particular when it involves construction. We do have some video of what we're talking about. It's got to be unique for you to be assigned strictly to research wage theft in the construction industry.
Yes, that's correct. Wage theft as an academic research topic is unfortunately a gap in our field. You know, as academics, we look at engineering. How do we design the construction process? But the responsibility for the individuals actually constructing, you know, what we call the built environment, a lot of times is left to another field. As an engineer, when I walk on a job site and if I see the construction worker, I say hello, ask them how they're doing, but I don't ask, you know, are you being paid properly? That's not my responsibility. But most likely, if I do ask, I might get answers that I don't expect.
Mm-hmm. Have you gotten that?
Yes, definitely. Walking on to construction sites now that I'm more aware that wage theft is as prevalent as it is through my research, going out and verifying that wage theft, you know, the dynamics of wage theft, and listening to construction workers. And it's interesting because it is California, so there's a lot of Latino workers. And so sometimes there's a language barrier and maybe a trust barrier as well. So, you know, I might ask some workers, you know, oh, how are you doing? You know, it's hot out today. And the workers will say, oh yeah, it's hot. I'll say, oh, you know, is this a pretty good company you work for? And they might say, oh, you know, it's okay. And I say, well, you know, do they always pay? And I say, you know, sometimes you don't get paid, and they might laugh and joke. And the next thing you know, there's these two workers in particular were telling me, they're like, no, we never get paid.
It's not a joke.
Yeah, it was for real for them. They started talking to each other, and you know, 3 minutes after I walked up and just said hello, these two workers are explaining to me how they really aren't paid.
And how are you allowed on the site? I know that they have strict guidelines on who can and can't.
Right. So finding sites to be allowed on is difficult.
Sure.
There are several ways I can ask local construction leaders to gain access to sites. I can ask construction companies to provide me access to sites. But as a researcher, I can always just walk down the sidewalk, and if there's workers within earshot, I can simply just say hello, and it's up to them if they'd like to talk with me or not.
You're a Stanford researcher. You can't have bias in your reporting. It has to be analytical. Yes. It has to be factual, and you can opine.
That's correct.
How vital is that's the kind of end result that you're going to come up with?
Remaining neutral is absolutely important. And of course, as a researcher, I don't have a choice because I have to follow where the data and the facts take me. You know, and when I start off with the assumption there is no wage theft, and I need to prove to myself that there is wage theft. Mm-hmm. And so I try hard to show that there is no wage theft. And to date, I have not been able to prove that. No matter how hard I try, I have only found evidence that there is wage theft. I found evidence that it's widespread. I found evidence that it's hidden, and I found evidence. I've had a difficult finding evidence that there is anywhere that doesn't have wage theft.
Wow. Your report will go where, and what will be done with it at the end?
So as an academic, we have publications that we have. They're academic journals where we publish this information so that it's available not just, you know, to other academics in the Western U.S., but also internationally and globally. So we can share information. You know, maybe wage theft also occurs in Poland, and it's possible that maybe wage theft there is similar to wage theft here. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe there's wage theft in Germany with similar dynamics. So we're able to share that information as wage theft researchers. It's an early field, and so there are other researchers out there, but it does take time, and it's through those publications that we're able to share that information.
And those victims, is there always a fear of something? Fear of deportation, fear of family harm? Why are they accepting the work for nothing?
So that's something that we've had a hard time understanding, is why is there wage theft? And we don't have an answer for that. there are publications that do show that if there's a workforce that does have, their paperwork is still a little bit out of order and they're still finalizing things, that maybe they're less likely to come forward and say that there's an issue, and they're waiting until they feel more secure before they come forward with that. So I have seen publications out of Europe that have shown that, especially from Eastern European workforces working in, say, the Eurozone, that they have seen concerns, say workers from Romania working in Germany, that they won't necessarily report those wage discrepancies that they're seeing.
Well, it's a billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah. So that's, I think that was one of the things we're talking about there, that wage theft is a global issue. It's not just in the United States. It's not Silicon Valley. It's not just about immigrant workers. Wage theft is everywhere. It's something to takes more research to understand. So Anthony is here. Let's make sure we can hear you, Anthony, just real quick.
Yep, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you great. That's my first time actually seeing that video. Well done, well done.
Yeah, Coach Sway all the credit for the video.
So Forrest, do we want to go through with the same kind of presentation as before, or how do we want to do this?
Yeah, we'll do the same. You want me to bring up your presentation?
Yeah, sure, that'd be great.
Jose, where's the, where is it?
I can also bring it up if you would like that. While they're bringing that up, I was wondering, so who do we have in the class right now?
There we go. So what we have in the classroom, let's see, you should be able to see me here on the video. What we have here on the left is we have some of the high school students. That's Team Iron. You can see them kind of right over here. And then over here on the right, that's Clear College. And so Team College is Evergreen Valley students. With Team Iron, as you can imagine, because it's called Team Iron, we have an iron worker, and this is Dennis over here. And then we have a guest from Evergreen Valley College, because this is an Evergreen Valley College class, and they're restarting their building information management program. And so
Okay.
I really wanted Evergreen to be here to see this class, because this lecture in particular, because I want to make sure that as we build that program, if we start off on day one with social justice, that program can't go wrong. That's kind of set that as the foundation. So that's the class we have in here. Let's see, we have your PowerPoint here.
I have one that says.
Okay. Now I can share the PowerPoint if that's easier, but I also can't see anybody else right now. I just see the video.
Oh, okay. You should have a screen on the side there that has let's see, everybody else in a smaller window. Let's see here. All right, so on the side here, participants. Let's see.
Your video's off for that one, it seems like.
Here we go. So you see the back of my head probably.
There we go. I don't see it though for me though, which is weird. Okay.
Yeah, so we have we have you up here, and then we have camera 1, which is of the classroom, and then camera 2, which is of the screen.
Beautiful.
Okay.
How's everybody doing today?
Wonderful.
Good.
Morning.
Good, good.
Let's see. And I'm bringing up your presentation. Here we go. So let's bring that over here. So we're not going to see you for a bit while we have the presentation here.
Good.
Let's see. Download that real quick. We'll open this up. And not sure if you have control of the screen. I can share the screen. It should give you, let's see.
How about I just share my screen and show the presentation that way?
We can do that too. Let's see, it's still opening. Let's see. Screen 1, screen 2. I think the computer's. What we're doing is we've got basically like an imaginary second screen going on here, so it's making it a little bit confusing. Let's see, there it is. And to share that, I go back over here. Okay, you have the screen now shared with you. And view, give me 1 second here. Reading view, approve, there you go. Oops.
Beautiful.
Hold on 1 second.
All right, so
There we go, now we're good.
as Forrest mentioned, social environmental justice, there's two real ways to think about this. There's from the political, from the theoretical and the academic side, and then there's the practical side. I'm going to really take it from the academic side, from the more political side and the legal side, while Josue is going to do a great job of showing it in the practical side and how that forms here. And so to really get started, what we're going to go through is, oh, it's not letting me. I want to move to the next slide, but it's lost control apparently.
I think we're going to have to do the slides for you, Anthony.
Okay, so you just do the next slide then?
Yes, so just hit next and we'll click for you.
All right, next.
You're there on the social justice slide, Anthony. Where do you see these?
Is it's showing, it seems to be showing, but for my recording, it shows it hasn't gone to the next slide.
Okay, which slide do you want?
Just the outline slide.
That one?
But my recording is showing that it's still on the title slide, so.
Interesting. Okay.
That's what I see too.
All right.
Yeah,
So let's do this real quick. I'm going to just use a single
let
screen.
me share my screen.
Okay, that's probably a better idea.
Yeah.
Duplicate on this side. All right.
All right. Is everybody able to see this, my presentation?
Yes. That was good.
Yeah, I can too.
All right, beautiful. All right, so yeah, so in this presentation, we're going to really go through the definitions, why we should care, have a little bit of discussion, and provide some historical reference, and then talk about the application of social environmental justice in construction. But depending on whether Forrest wants to go in that, we can skip that last part as well. So starting with social justice. Social justice is the fair and just relation between the individual and society. And I want you to think about fair and just relation between individual and society and what that could mean. Would anybody like to put out, I know some of you have seen this presentation before, so don't give it all away, but what are some categories of social justice that we could be thinking about?
Hey, Anthony, real quick. Did you advance the slide?
Yeah, is it not showing to social justice right now or no?
Just go to view and then select read view. I think that's the only way it shows through Zoom. We had the same problem with at the site feed presentations.
View and review?
View and then read. Reading view.
Oh, I got it. Understand.
Yeah. You probably have to end the presentation real quick.
Yep, there we go. How's that now?
Yeah, perfect. Now we got it.
All right, so your outline, social justice, we're moving.
Yeah, we're working on it.
All right, so when we talk about the fair and just relation between individual and society, we're thinking about how certain things that we all expect to have, and whether those are equally distributed amongst these amongst everybody equally, right? So what's something that we all share in that may or may not be as accessible to certain people?
Education.
Education, yeah.
Live in a clean environment free of hazardous contaminants.
Excuse me? What was the last thing I was said?
To live in a clean environment that doesn't have contaminants.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. What's something else?
I'd like to say opportunity.
Great.
And I mean
happened?
that in a very broad way.
Yeah, no, I hear you. What happens if you get sick? Yeah, absolutely. So equal play, opportunity, health is wealth, right? Another thing that people don't think about is access to healthy food, what things called food deserts, where you actually literally don't have access in your neighborhood to fresh fruit, fresh vegetables. This is a little bit rarer out in California where there's so much produce being produced, but definitely something that's a real serious issue in a lot of the country. Now, at this moment, I want, so the next one is the environmental justice, and that is the fair distribution of environmental benefits and burdens. And for this, I want everybody to pull out their phone and Google Lake Erie fire. And Erie is spelled E-R-I-E, so Lake Erie fire. And then just go to images. Yeah, people are starting to see what happened. Literally, the whole lake was on that. You had portions of the lake on fire, and this was caused by severe pollution in that area. Now, what's some stuff? What kind of environmental burdens can? What are some categories or sections? How can we organize environmental burdens? And think about one or two.
Talk about chemicals?
Excuse me?
You talk about chemicals or something pollutants?
How can we be impacted differently by the environment?
Regulation.
So if I go to one city versus another city, what's going to be different about that environment?
Regulations, policies in place.
Yeah. Now, what do those regulations and policies result in?
It could be.
So one example would be clean air, right? How clean is the air that you're living in and working in?
Well, yeah, Anthony, regulations could be the quality of air, drinking water, noise,
Yeah, water.
noise, how much noise there is related.
Absolutely.
All the way, and noise, it could be anything from cars driving by, trains, airplanes.
Yep, exactly. I mean, you look at housing prices, they're a little bit cheaper right around airports, right? Because of that noise. So, and so there's quite a few things. we mentioned water. We haven't mentioned soil. How many people are familiar with Love Canal story? I know there's a few there that are familiar. So essentially, the Love Canal, there's a few people who aren't familiar. Is that correct there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Love Canal was in upstate New York. I know a lot of people don't think New York has any place outside New York City, but there is communities outside of New York City, and it's upstate New York. And it was originally an industrial site, and these companies would just dump their industrial waste and bury them in the soil in these containers, metal containers. Well, over time, the industrial businesses started going out of business or what have you, and they sold their land, and a community started building up. And from this picture, you can see these are homes, and then you have this large school for that community. And eventually, after a heavy rains, there started drums of these industrial waste started coming out of the soil in certain places. Other things that were happening were there were a lot of birth defects in the area. So kids were being born with serious issues. There was miscarriages, an increase in cancer and leukemia and other diseases. And they couldn't figure out what was going on until these drums started coming out of the soil. And it became very clear that the whole area was contaminated and was impacting it. So as the kids were in school playing in the yard, they were actually basically being poisoned. And this became a huge ordeal, primarily because this was an actually middle-class white community. So while historically minority communities are the ones who are in these spaces that are contaminated, I mean, we look at Flint, Michigan. That is a minority African-American community, and you see that this is a historical reality that minorities are usually in these spaces. So when you talk about environmental justice, really what we're talking about is how minorities are getting the unfair portion of the burdens, while more affluent communities and white communities are getting more of the benefits of the environmental, right? So this is really the crux of environmental justice, is how class and race impact how people are, where people live, the quality of life they get. And if you look at this middle graph with the state of the air, right? You look at where the really affordable areas, or the low income areas, the rural areas, really bad, really red, right? While the more affluent areas are a lot better in terms of the air quality. And if you map this over with income, you also see this. So Santa Barbara, Monterey, Santa Clara, San Mateo, San Francisco, Marin, all that great air quality, right? So why do we care? Why do we care? And primarily, you care because the next generation are the ones impacted and are at risk. Studies show that children are more likely to be impacted by poor air quality through asthma and other issues, more likely to develop cancers, and the children and elderly are more likely to develop cancers or have a larger impact on their health. And so when you think about why these social justice, environmental justice, fair pay, all of these come into the same space where people are a certain group of people are being impacted more so than others, right? And so at this point, I want to stop my talking and kind of open up to a little bit of group discussion amongst you about kind of things that you've seen in your life or that you've heard about that represent social or environmental injustices?
Anthony, this is Josue. Just right now, for example, the city of San Jose is suing Caltrain, I think, because of the trains come by in the middle of the night. They make too much noise all the way from the track noise, all the way from the horns. And but I'm actually surprised because it took the city of San Jose too long. Because, and you mentioned earlier, other cities more to the north are more proactive because they are more affluent cities. I mean, many of the residents are attorneys, doctors, and high-tech people that have resources. But finally, communities, working class communities from the city of San Jose put pressure in the city to the point that now the city is suing Caltrain. It's for noise.
Yeah, absolutely. You have this situation where a social injustice about someone not getting paid can impact the environmental justice because they don't have the time or money or energy because they got to work 2 jobs to actually push back when someone wants to put in a wastewater treatment plant in their community or a dump in their community. So you're absolutely right that these social justice and environmental justice are linked. They're not in their own vacuums, that they're connected and actually result in one being the disparity between groups of people being greater.
For us, another example that I can give, just for the group, I track projects, and when a developer comes to town and they want to do something, they have to hold community meetings. When I go to the west side of San Jose, like the Amadén Valley, Willow Glen, those areas, the developer has a community meeting. Very often 100 people show up. But when developers come to the east side, very few people show up. For example, I attended a meeting on the west side and 100 angry people showed up. And these are people that work during the day and they have the afternoon off, so they go to these meetings. And then I attended a flea market meeting where they are going to be building homes. 6 people showed up. One of the parents are working because many of them have 2 jobs.
Absolutely. Anybody else some social or environmental? Yeah, please.
You could just go to Montana. You can go to like Butte, Montana, where in Anaconda, where it's the soil's so contaminated that the electric company won't even put in power lines for like 2,000 years. And
wow,
when you go around Butte and you go into the malls or wherever, you see people. They look a little deformed and things like that. And I was always kind of shocked by that. So I asked my wife's father about that because he's a doctor. And he said, yeah, usually around mining where they mine in cities and stuff like that, they get a lot of childhood deformities and stuff like that because all the contaminants from the minerals come out and so on and them smelting and so on and so forth. So that kind of shocked me. So, I understand that people of low income and different ethnic backgrounds and stuff might have more social. They might have more problems in the environment, but we're talking about history too. 75, 100 years ago, where these camps were all destroyed by these mines, and the people have lots of problems and issues.
Yeah,
still absolutely. So it's not just one group of people, or it's blanketed pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, no, I think the big thing that is important to which, and I completely agree. Love Canal, right? Is that until recently there were no policies, and I say recently, starting about the 70s, and I'll go through that kind of timeline. But there weren't really policies to stop bad actors from polluting, right? There weren't policies to say that there weren't federal paid minimums didn't always exist, right? So there were places that had a huge variability in pay in child labor and these things. So that there's one of the reasons why we need laws and one of the reasons why regulations are important is because it provides a standard for us. So miners, for instance, everybody's like, oh, bring coal back, but coal maybe was a job for someone, but it also was a health risk for that whole family. And they would have stories of the parent coming home from the coal mine, and their clothes would have all the contaminants on them, and it would impact their kids.
Right.
And so, and I mean, coal miners historically are primarily white, right? There's not,
Yeah.
so it's not just minority groups. It's also a class issue, right? Where if you could afford to not be a coal miner, you were not going to be a coal miner.
Yeah.
But if you couldn't, and it just generation after generation, you have folks being coal miners because that's all they had available to them.
Yeah, I guess that's where we go back to lack of opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think this ties in well for everybody to think about how renewable energy and energy efficiency and sustainability impacts these things, right? So if you're replacing every coal miner job with a job to build a solar panel or a wind turbine, right? Not only are they still having a job, but they're also not being impacted by this health and risks, right? And so that improving one also helps another. So being more sustainable increases people's health. It increases the air quality. So it reduces how much, and air quality affects everybody that lives there, right? I mean, whether you're a low income, Black person, Hispanic person, white person, if the air quality is not good, you're going to be impacted by it. And so there's a lot of connections, everything. And one of the things I would like y'all to take from this is that everything's connected, right? But when you hear conversations about solar energy or wind energy, also remember that that's going to help on other things. It's going to help with air quality for everybody, for yourself, for your kids, future kids, for your family members, for your parents. Quality of life is impacted by the environment that we live in.
This is Fred. Anthony?
Yeah, please.
Fred Mitchell of Evergreen Valley College. I also see, you look at this coal miner thing, it's got to be education as well, that they're afraid to try something new because, as you mentioned earlier, the generations that worked in the coal mines. And I think that a lot of them are probably not the most educated, workers that we have. So they can't see the vision of solar and wind and that type of thing. So I think a big impact is based on the quality of education and the ability to encourage, and I'm speaking of coal miners in particular, but all folks basically, to think out of the box and think of something better. If you're working in a coal mine, now that we're going to take your health care away, we probably have a better chance of having, some kind of disease. And I don't know if they're putting that together.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Education is a great example of a social injustice, right? You look at, in California today, there's a big fight about charter schools, right? And how charter schools, the history of charter schools, however you feel about them now, the history of charter schools was really based on after desegregation of public schools, and a way for folks to prevent desegregation. It was to create a difference between public and private, and public and charter. And so there's a lot of dynamics here where education is not equal across this country at all, right? I mean, you look at the school systems just in San Jose, and I'm sure there's a difference in quality in just San Jose. Would I be wrong about that?
You'd be right.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
You know, maybe this is a little unrelated, but the solar industry that's becoming so huge. There's a huge problem with recycling solar panels because solar panels typical lifespan is 25 years, but as they continue to upgrade, the solar panels, people change them out to go with the latest, and now the recycling on a solar panel, I think there might be $40 worth of material that's worth recycling in there, but there's a huge now abundance of used solar panels. They don't know what to do with them.
I mean, that sounds like a great business opportunity. When I hear that, I'm like, reuse, send it to solar panels to neighborhoods who can't afford to buy new ones if they're still able to be performed. But yeah, I mean, there's a cycle of everything has a downside to it. Everything has a downside to it. The too much of a good thing is still not great for you. There's a very interesting observation about the solar panels. Thank you. All right, so with that, I think let's move on to kind of the historical legislation regulation I was talking about earlier, and that was tied to, which was brought up with the coal miner. And really what you can see from this is that there's still, with social justice, it started with Social Security Act back in '35, and there's been steady things that really the 50s and the 60s was a huge boom for social justice. They covered discrimination based on race and gender, everyone being able to vote, right? The Fair Housing Act that came around because literally folks were not allowed to move into certain neighborhoods because they would be discriminated against. And so what you see through the history of our country is that we don't put in legislation and regulation based on just because it's the right thing to do. Behind all of these is some serious political battles and public battles about whether this was needed, whether this made government too big. But if you look at something like the Water Quality Act, right? And could you imagine right now that there was no standards for how well the faucet, what quality of water the faucet you get out of your sink is? Like none of us, when we pour from the tap and drink that water, none of us worry about it being filled with mercury. None of us worry about it being filled with some other heavy metal that can really damage us, our brains or our bodies. But up until 1965, that was a real situation. The big one, 1976, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act for hazardous waste. That actually is a large fund because there's hundreds of what they call Superfund sites. And a Superfund site is a contaminated site that cannot be built on, essentially. It is so contaminated that nothing can be built on that. And so there's a huge chest or fund of money in the federal government specifically set to go and clean up those Superfund sites. So pollution for the last 200 years, we're still working on trying to improve that. And some things you can't just improve. Certain waste, there's different, something that people study is actually how do you remove contaminated waste from soil. And that's a whole research area, that is a whole industry that people go into. And so there's a historical context to think about this from when you hear about conversations now about, oh, should we do this or should we do that? From a political standpoint, there's always for every single one of these that you see, there is always a fight to prevent that from occurring. So anybody have any questions about the environmental social justice kind of regulations and legislations that came through?
Can I say something, Anthony? Can I say something about Social Security?
Yeah.
You know, you're right about the, we don't always do the right thing. Probably a lot of people don't know this, but the Social Security Act really wasn't about benefiting the American public for retirement and for other disabilities. The original intent for Social Security was to help pay for World War II. And I know it acted in 1935, but that was really what they needed. They needed funds for preparing for war.
That's a great point.
That's why Social Security has financial problems, because they still, to this day, still keep raiding the kitty to pay for, you know, war things or NASA or whatever. They're still, Congress is still allowed to go ahead and raid the kitty.
Yeah, I think, and this goes back to education, right? The understanding of why things were created in the first place and what were the oppositions. Because I guarantee you, if you go back and listen to footage about, they actually had this interesting thing, a quote about Social Security Act. Someone said about the Social Security Act about how, or maybe it was Medicare and Medicaid, right? When that first came out. And the quotes that they have about that and trying to prevent that is the same quotes you'll hear today. And it's people who study this stuff, they see the similarities all the time. That there's always someone who's going to be against it. And whether it's, especially if it's something that's going to benefit everybody, or maybe even low income or minorities more, then there's also a pushback from that. And you'll hear the same rhetoric 30 years ago, 50 years ago, 70 years ago about a different thing.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I saw your presentation. Does Anthony have in social justice included the major labor legislation?
I
can't hear you from the mic.
I don't see, like, you know, the Davis-Bacon Act or, you know, the National Labor Relations Act. You know, I don't see those things on there as far as any of the big policies that affected laborers or union labor.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you very well. Could
We'll put those on. You'll list Anthony in some labor acts that change from the labor standpoint. But I think some of those, maybe we can look at those and see if those fit under social justice.
I think they will, like when they certify the airlines and all those things. Maybe you want to add also the eliminating of prevailing wage as well, state by state.
Some of those can be a little bit controversial, so
yeah.
It's like Social Security, why they reach out to some of these things. They're good now, but sometimes it took a while to get them. So that was prevailing wage state by state.
Prevailing wage in LRB and Davis-Bacon.
So that's a big LRB and Davis-Bacon.
NLRA.
NRA.
NLRA. National Labor Relations Act.
There was another, the Davis-Bacon, there was the one that came after the Davis-Bacon, a little bit. Don't there, what's it? Thank you, Anthony. Sorry, we were having a little side discussion here on labor law.
No, that's always good. And I'm really starting to get a little bit of understanding of labor law myself with starting my company and understanding the policies and what is the minimum versus what is actually healthy for your employees. And this kind of give and take, right? Because the more you give to your employees, the less profit you make. And so for people who are profit driven, as opposed to kind of mission driven, then maybe they're going to be short-sighted and go with the minimum standards or try and even shortcut those standards, because a lot of people don't know what their rights are in the labor force. They don't know that if they work a certain amount of hours, they are mandated to have a certain amount of breaks. So, which goes back to education, right? Well, I think we'll end it here and let Josue take over.
So we're transitioning here. And one thing I want to mention about Anthony, Anthony, can I introduce you a little bit? I didn't introduce you exactly, like the full title, right?
Right.
So Anthony grew up in Baltimore, which, like me, I didn't know where Baltimore is. So if anyone doesn't know where Baltimore is on the other side of the country. It's on the East Coast. And so when Anthony described Baltimore, it sounded like parts of San Jose where I remember as a kid. And one of the interesting things was when I was talking with Anthony about the high school that I graduated from, which was in South County, Anthony said the statistics of the high school that I graduated from were worse than some of the inner city high schools of Baltimore, which started to put in perspective, what was my education like growing up here in Santa Clara County? When you see pictures of inner cities in Baltimore and you think, oh, well, I got a better education. But then Anthony was the first one to say, no, I think you actually had a worse education. And, like the lecture Anthony just gave, I never had that lecture ever. I don't know how many years of education. I think I'm like year 24 of education, or something like that. Never saw that lecture. Nobody ever gave that lecture. The closest I ever came to that lecture was some guy getting out of his pickup truck with a union hat, handing out stickers, having a little, roadside discussion with us about, what are our rights and when to call and things like that. But Anthony was the first one to kind of put all that together. So one of the things about Anthony that I also didn't know is Anthony, here, help me out here. Where was it you lived in the Middle East?
Yeah, in Abu Dhabi, in the UAE.
No idea where that is. Someplace in the Middle East, right? And
yeah.
He says, Forrest, I can tell you've never been outside of San Jose. Palo Alto is traveling for me. So,
Where's Palo Alto?
Yeah, somewhere up north, right? And so Anthony, I think, comes back with a perspective, looking at ourselves, but his perspective is from way outside. And so I think that means that Anthony, he sees things that the rest of us just we don't see. But Anthony comes in and it seems so clear. You see that presentation, you're like, well, of course. But I never saw that presentation before. And so, of course, Anthony, you just finished your PhD in civil environmental engineering and energy analysis of residential home retrofitting. Is that correct? Did I get that?
Yes, single-family homes.
Single-family homes. Yeah. So Anthony's done a lot of really good things. I think Anthony's going to go on and do a lot of good things. You're at the you're starting your own business with energy sustainability.
Yeah, focused on energy efficiency for small commercial spaces.
And one of your major clients right now is the San Francisco airport?
Yes. I'm actually here now. I have the SFO as the client and working with a few utility companies both here and in the Southeast. And my major goal for the company is to increase diversity and energy efficiency and also target folks who don't have the resources or the money to buy expensive equipment, to have expensive consultants come in and tell them how to save energy, et cetera, to really target folks who otherwise wouldn't be able to get this type of resources. So.
And I suppose you'll probably come across mechanical trades, HVAC, electrical, pipe fitting in that role.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're really trying to not take anybody's jobs, but enlarge the pie. Everyone's worried about getting their piece of the pie. We're focused on enlarging the pie so everybody gets more.
Sounds good. Thank you, Anthony. I'll use that to transition.
Thank you.
Josue, oh yeah, go ahead.
Can you share this PowerPoint with us?
Yeah. Yep. We have a copy of it here.
Okay, and I'd like to have your email. I'm looking.
Oh, yes, please. I will send it to Forrest, and then he can share with whoever wants it.
All right, thank you.
It's Kinslow@stanford.edu.
Oh, I'm going to send you a different one because that's going to be going away soon.
Okay.
No, I'm no longer a student.
No more.
Hey, Anthony, I just want to say, thank you for the presentation, and the work that you're doing is extremely critical. So it's really an important job what you're trying to do.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, let's give Anthony a round of applause. So that's a great transition to Josue Garcia, who leads the Mechanical Contractors Association with the Tri-Trades. Do I go from there?
I don't know where.
Up here or there? That's actually perfect. Yeah.
Let me go up there.
Okay. And so, a lot of the reason why I'm standing here and giving this lecture is Josue Garcia. I won't do too much of an introduction. I'll let you introduce yourself, but was the CEO of the Building Trades Council. So the Building Trades Council, does anyone here know what the Building Trades Council is, other than Dennis? Okay. So the Building Trades Council, all the different trades you learn about in construction, they all have different schools where you go to learn to be in that trade. So like this program right here is kind of the pre-step before you go to those apprenticeship programs. They're called apprenticeship education. So in this class here is where in high school you kind of get a taste of construction and you think, oh, I really like this work. And so then from here you apply to an apprenticeship program, maybe the masons, the electricians, the roofers, maybe the laborers, the carpenters. There's lots of these different trades. So Josue was the CEO of the organization that all those schools are under. And those schools have way more to them than just a school. They have basically alumni programs where for your whole career, they'll find you work. They will, if you have trouble at work, it's almost like a law firm. You call up and they send somebody out to talk for you. They'll even find you lawyers if they really need that, but they'll send somebody out first to, so I can focus on just doing my job. I don't have to go and know the whole book of labor law and everything. I just feel like something's not right. And I can call up and say, hey, in school, at the apprenticeship program, I learned this. We're out here. This doesn't seem right. Can you send somebody out and kind of double check? So Josue was the head of that organization for this region. And so when he was the CEO, Josue was very welcoming to me. And that helped me feel comfortable entering into the space of teaching classes like this and working more on the workforce education side and not as much on, I guess would be like the computer science of the software side. And the software side is boring at the end of the day. You just do the same thing over again. But Josue showed me, a whole other side of this industry that I think is a lot more interesting. So I'll turn it over to Josue.
Thank you, Forrest, and thank you all for inviting me, and thanks for Anthony to let me be part of his presentation. We have been co-teaching or co-presenting for 2 or 3 times already. So I don't know if Anthony's still there, but thank you and congratulations on your new adventure, creating the company, doing good stuff. Again, thank you. Well, my name is Josue Garcia, and I'll add a little bit to the introduction. Thank you for the introductions. That's what money gets you, a good introduction. You have to pay for it to give you a good introduction. Thank you, Forrest. My name is Josue. I'm from Mexico, originally from Mexico, and I came to the United States many years ago. I don't have financial necessity like many people, like many immigrants. And I wanted, when I came, I wanted a good job in construction, and what a better place to work in construction for a union company. So I went out there looking for work, and I ended up being hired by a roofing company. So I'm a roofer by trade. I was a roofer for many years, became a union representative for the Roofers Union. I did that for many years, and then I went to work for the Building Trades Council, and Dennis and I were basically co-workers. So no, actually Dennis was one of my bosses at Building Trades Council. And I did that for many years. I worked a little bit for the city of San Jose as a chief of staff for one of the council members. And then this organization that I represent now, which is for construction unions, called me to start the organization and to get ahead of the organization. And I've been doing this for a little bit over a year. But I've been in construction for over about 35 years, which is it's a long time. And over those years, you see many things. You see that construction is evolving now. Now we have people using computers all over the place. Before, back then, the wireless tools, we had wireless tools, which was like a saw, a regular saw. It's wireless, it doesn't have any wires attached. I hope you got that joke. But now we have everything. I mean, you can measure things with your iPhone now. I mean, you just take a picture and measure it. Very cool. And in construction, even union and non-union, you can make good money. It's a good industry to get into. And for my own experience in the construction industry, it is a whole world, a whole universe out there that you are starting, or maybe you've been for a while, but if you are starting, it's a universe of opportunities out there. You won't believe how many opportunities. As I said, I started as a roofer, and I ended up being the CEO of the building trades. I am now the director for this organization. But that industry allowed me, which is something that I wanted to do, to meet presidents. And these two, Bill Clinton, former President Bill Clinton, and former President of Mexico, Vicente Fox. So if you can picture me as an immigrant coming to the country all the way to meeting, I got into politics, and I'll explain right now. And I mean, making it to meeting these people face to face, that's super cool. And I don't know what these people have, but they radiate, that makes it correct some kind of energy when you meet them. It's amazing when you meet these people. You check their hands. That's why they make it to the top. They have something that I don't have for sure, but many times most of us don't. So construction, it has many phases, but if I can put it in two phases, if I can divide it, you have the construction, which is building something. That's one phase. But prior to building something, you have a political side of construction. Construction is very political, and that's what I do. I'm on the first end of construction, where things get very political. And to build a project, there's a lot of politics that have to go in before somebody breaks ground, before somebody starts cutting wood. A good example is the 49ers Stadium. Dennis and I worked on pushing for that project. But I remember, and probably Dennis too, we used to go to city council every Tuesday for many weeks, for weeks and weeks and weeks, from 7 o'clock to midnight, asking city council to approve the project. And on the other hand, community groups showed up and no, let's not build the project. They put it on the ballot and voters voted. And so it gets very political. So on any sizable project, either me or people like me or people like Dennis back in that time, we have to go from 3 to 5 years pushing for a project before it gets built. And that's what I've been doing for many years on the political side. So when you get into the construction industry full force, think about that possibility that you can also end up in the political side and do something like what I do. And it's fascinating. I recommend it, and I don't know how I learned it, but I learned it, and it's fun. Now, I guess why they invited me. And by the way, how much time do I have? So I have 3 hours of a PowerPoint here. Is that how much I have? 3 hours? Okay. Well, I got 3 hours. I'm gonna go for the 3 hours if you guys don't mind. All right. Now, I remember how I got into the construction industry because there is good pay in the construction industry. And throughout my life, and I think Dennis can also say the same thing for his life, you make good money in construction. You will not be rich, you will not be a millionaire or anything like that, but you will make a decent living. You will have good wages, good healthcare, and a pension when you retire. Something basic, and you will not be a millionaire for sure, but you will have a decent wage. But I've learned throughout my career that you have the other section, especially in the non-union sector, where workers get exploited all the time. And I'm making this presentation, so when you get into the construction industry, actually working for companies or working for a company like I do, make sure workers don't get exploited anymore. I think this has to stop. Recently, in fact, a year ago, and the person was sentenced a month ago, I think, a company, well, there is this development in downtown San Jose, right across the street from the San Pedro market. I don't know if you guys, I think you guys know where the San Pedro market is. There are 2 towers being built. That one of the contractors had 22 workers in captivity. This contractor had them in captivity. Now, when you open Yahoo front page, you see this happening in Bangladesh, Mexico, somewhere in the world, China, and you never think that this will be happening here. And when we first learned, and we took the case all the way to court, we said that cannot be possible. How can that be possible here in one of the wealthiest area in the world? There's a lot of money. There is no need to exploit workers. You can pay workers good money and still make more money as a contractor. But this is happening. About 3 months ago, I got a call from a friend of mine that said, hey, these workers, I ran into these workers for some strange reason. And they told me that they were exploited. They are working at a hotel in Milpitas. Can you help them? I go, yeah, well, put me in contact with them. And I go, sure enough. So I called that one person and I said, hey, somebody just told me that you guys were not paid for working on this project. He said, yeah. I go, can you send me some information? Do you have timesheets? Do you have, oh yeah, we have everything. He says, I'll send them to you when I get home. And I was thinking, well, that makes sense. With traffic and everything, it's gonna be like an hour when they get home. And then I go, yeah, sure, that's fine. You can send it to me. He says, oh, in fact, I'll send it to you at the next gas stop, at the next gas station, because I have to put gas. And I go, that's weird. He says, me and the other workers are driving to South Carolina, because that's where we are from. I go, oh, okay. So tell me more. And he says, he said to me, he says, well, the contractor from Texas hired us from South Carolina. They brought us over to Milpitas, and they usually pay for hotel and pizza every night, right? And he says, this morning, and I have a video, the contractor showed up and told us, hey, I'm not paying you your wages and I'm not paying for the hotel anymore, so you guys have to leave. And they go, no, what do you mean we have to leave? You have to pay us and you have to keep paying us for the hotel because we made arrangements to leave home for a month or 2 months. He said, no, we're not paying you. And do whatever you want. If you don't show up, the cops are going to show up and take you out of the hotel because we're not paying and we're not paying. So the workers left, and there they go, 22 workers back to South Carolina. And that happens very often here. We are helping the workers. Now the state of California is working on it, because we have the contacts and all those things. And the point of the presentation, I'm going to give you the grand finale, is that when you get into the construction industry, think about these things. This is what happened in the construction industry. When a project goes over budget and over time, they get a team of engineers, superintendents, and the head of construction. They put him in a table and they go, the project is over time and over budget. Can you guys come up with ideas on how to bring it on time and on budget? And you know the big main idea is? I have an idea. Forrest, you have an idea?
Let's work everybody nights and then we won't pay.
There you go. That's a good, let's do that then. And the project will be, I mean, that's what people do. Let's exploit the workers and that will bring us under budget. And the idea is to say, no, man, let's not do that. Let's think about how to engineer the project. Let's come up with ideas so we can bring it on time and on budget, but without exploiting the workers, because it can be done. That's just the easy exit. And let's just exploit people. And that's a great idea. In fact, Torres, you're very smart. You are going to get a raise and a promotion. You see, people become heroes. And that's what, we don't want you to be like that. And so if once you start working for a company, if I ever see you do that, I'm gonna come, hey, you were not listening to my presentation back then. All right, guys? And I will come down. And the reason for my presentation is because I grew up in Mexico, very, very poor. And there's plenty, from my point of view, there's plenty of wealth in the world for all of us to have a decent life. I don't think kids should be millionaires, but people should have a different life. I mean, if you can see the pictures here, I mean, why some people are suffering and some people have a decent life. I think every kid, especially not grown-ups, but kids should have a decent life. But this is even happening here. I mean, I was driving here and I came through from Story Road, took Gracia this way, and there was a whole line of homeless things. So this is happening here, and a lot of the times, homeless don't have a home because they have been exploited. If they were paid the wages they deserved, they will be paying the rent still. So this is happening, and I think it's unfair. Right now, there's a lot of construction here in the valley. And when I talk to developers and contractors, they are telling me that they see at least 3 to 5 years, which this is unheard of. So there's plenty of money, there's plenty of opportunities. And the problem is that, well, let me tell you, let me go through the presentation. Oops. The problem is that everybody wants to make a lot of money, but they don't want the workers to make money. For example, this house was sold for $800,000. I mean, and then if you hire workers to fix it, they will say, well, we don't have any money to pay the workers. What do you mean if you just sold this house for $800,000? What do you mean you don't have enough money? And once they fix it, it's going to double the price. And if you tell me, oh, sorry, we don't have any money, we have to exploit it. I think, no, there's something shady there. And Anthony spoke about social issues, and this is a social issue because workers don't make enough money to be able to live here. They have to drive to the Central Valley all the time. And when they do that, their kids suffer. Their education, not being with their parents. I don't have data on this, but I tend to think that a lot of 13-year-old kids are raising the 9-year and the 8-year-old kid because mom and dad are not home. So if a kid is hungry, what is a 13-year-old going to do? Oh, well, let me make a cup of noodles. That's not very healthy, by the way, but hey, that's all I'm a 13-year-old, that's all I'm doing. My mom and dad are coming from San Jose, they're going to be here at 8 at night. And so that creates social injustice only because we displace people, but because they cannot afford to live. I don't want you to read this whole thing here, but can you read that? Is it too small or can you read that part? Are you able to read it? Are you able to read it? Is it readable? I mean, workers in 5 years, the average worker got only 4 cents wage increase. I mean, yeah, 4 cents. How much the cost of living has increased? Just gas. I mean, just man, I don't know. and for us in labor, and we partner with education, for us to improve people wages so people can be able to live here, we are working, and this class is a perfect example. And this is where we are here. We are getting into high schools and colleges to teach students how to get into the construction industry and earn a decent living, but not to be exploited. This is here, right here, and I don't know, probably Jose know Nick Sofioro, that teacher. I don't know if you guys ever met Nick Sofioro back in the day, but we created this program so people can earn a living. Now, there's some other projects coming up. This is behind the Tech Museum. This is coming up. This is going to be a very luxurious building. And this is to show that this developer is going to pay union wages. Now, the project, a little bit farther, 3 blocks from there, where the workers were exploited, they are saying, no, we cannot build it because we cannot afford to pay good wages. And we always go, well, if this developer can pay the wages and still make money, how come you can't make money? Why do you have to exploit people? But this is how the project is going to look from the side. They're going to have restaurants going from the high-tech museum to the convention center. It's going to be nice. Can't wait to have a cup of coffee at night. This is another big project, and we hope that it's going to be union. This is going to be across the street from the 49er Stadium. This project is going to be 10 times Santana Row.
Is that Joe Montana's place?
That's, it used to. Joe Montana pulled out of that deal.
Did he pull out?
Yeah, he pulled out, yeah. And by the way, he wasn't too enthusiastic about paying good wages.
Oh.
But he's not part of the deal anymore.
Okay.
Now the owner of the Dolphins is part of the deal.
Dolphins?
The Dolphins, Miami. It's part of the deal. But nevertheless, this project is going to bring a lot of work, and we are hoping, and it looks like the project is going to be built with union labor.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I want to know how they recruit these workers, how do they recruit the labor? Because if they go in and say, I'm going to pay you X amount of dollars to work for me, all of a sudden they're not getting paid. I want to know how is it that they stay on the job? Are they threatening them? I mean, I want to know, I came out of, I've been a corporate recruiter. So when I hear these employment issues that concerns me, who's recruiting them and how are they not being paid? And by the way, why are they still going back to work if they're not being paid?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll give an example. The perfect example is the Silver Towers, where the workers were placed in captivity.
Yeah.
The contractor went to Tijuana and recruited people, and they said, if you come to work for me, I'll pay you well and all those things. And you know, you go, okay, yeah, let's do that. But that could happen here. In fact, he had some workers from here as well. So the workers came over, and then he was paying them in the beginning, and then he stopped paying them. And then at night, he took them to a warehouse and locked them up. They were living in horrible conditions. And then in the morning, he'll pick them up, and you will say, well, how come they don't say anything? I mean, that you can just say, or even during the day, just run away. Just.
Probably should be
Yeah. My presentation comes with
sound effects, huh?
with sound effects. Yeah.
They're passing it and easily will last a few seconds, and they go turn off. So.
Yeah. All right, my presentation comes with sound effects, as usual, and I try to make it more more interesting. So I have other and live effects as well. You say I have other stuff.
Why do you do that? That was a false alarm to configure cloud. Yes. Again, that was a false alarm to configure cloud.
That was a false alarm. All right, guys, let's go to the presentation so we can get people on time. So why did the workers stay in this case? And then I'll talk about other cases. And why don't you just run when you're at the construction site? Well, the contractor told him, I know your family in Mexico, and I am connected to the cartels. Yeah. And I know who your mom, and this is your mom, and this is your dad, and your brother and sister. If you leave or mention anything to any authority, guess what's going to happen to your family members? So, I mean, what do you do? What is, okay, I'm captive. Now, that's the extreme, but that actually happened because that's what the court documents say. Now, on a regular side, let's say that they're not in captivity, they're just not getting paid. What happens is that a contractor says, hey, I'll give you some work. And you go, sure, and then they pay you the first week, the third week, and then the fourth, and then they go, you know what, I'm gonna pay you 4 days only because I have not getting paid, so I owe you 1 day. And then they go, I owe you 3 days, and now I owe you 4 weeks, and all those things. And people do work in good faith. They say, okay, well, he was paying me. Maybe he's having financial troubles, and he'll pay me a big check 1 day. So that's one of the ways they do it until the time they go, hey, I'm not paying you. And then that's just a simple wage step. But and then you get into the, hey, I should be getting overtime and you're not paying me overtime, or I should be getting breaks and you're not giving me breaks, and all those things pile up to the point that it's a lot of money. I don't help workers directly because my scope of work is different. But the last 2 workers I helped, they got 332,000. When you're talking about being homeless with 332,000, you can buy a home cash in Stockton. You see how these things happen, and all the money went to someone, and obviously, but that's how it happened.
One of those numbers that came up, Alyssa, who helped develop this program. Actually, I sit in a room, Anthony, Alyssa, me, Sergio, we all sit together. When I showed a number like what Josue just said, $300-something thousand, Alyssa looked up and she said, "How's that even possible?" And we had to kind of go through, just like Josue said, it's a little bit by little bit, and over time it builds up into these huge amounts of money. But as a worker, if you really notice that little bit over time, you don't know how much they're stealing.
Yeah. Right. It's big money. In fact, workers that I'm gonna deviate a little bit. The workers that I was helping, it took a while for me to get their confidence, and they go, "Okay, Josue, we trust you now. Let's move forward with the lawsuit." So we were going through very well, and everything was working right. And then we had the court date one day, and then I got a call from the workers, "Hey, Josue, can you come by?" I showed up, and then I said, "Hey, you know the thing that we were working on? We don't want to move forward." I go, "What are you talking about? You were so excited, and we have a good case. We are going to win." "No, we want to move forward. Thank you very much." And, "Oh, man, there's something wrong here." And then I started talking to the workers, and weeks went by. And, "How do you want to move forward? You have a good case." And, "No, we're good. Nothing's wrong. Just we." And it went like that until somebody says, "No, you know what? The contractor told me if you show up at court, the immigration officer is going to be right there standing just to get you." And I go, "That's not true. I've been telling that he watches too much TV. That's just on TV. That doesn't happen in real life. The court will not allow it." And then I had to work in their the workers' head to give them confidence. And then once they said, "You know what? Let's go. And even if the officer is there, we'll go to court." And then we went to court, and no officer. In fact, I have some pictures, not here, but I have some pictures where some selfies said, "Hey, where is the officer at?" And they got their money, and they live happy forever after. But all those things happen. For sure. So there's a lot of development. This is the same project over by the stadium. Balco proposed this project. I don't think they're moving forward, but developers are building bigger things now. Building a home or a strip mall, like the little shopping malls where you see CVS and those things, those are things of the past. People want to build something big, something huge. This is a balcony. They proposed it, but the community didn't want it. But underneath was the mall. This was just the top of the mall. That was on top of the mall. The mall was going to be underneath. All that, you see it?
What was that going to be?
In Cupertino, a balcony mall.
Oh,
you see that
that's what they were going to do, a balcony mall?
They were going to have a park on top and the whole. That's pretty cool stuff.
No joke.
Then, you know, we build the Apple projects, and all these people pay good wages. They make it, you know, Apple. Now, high-tech companies have become developers, and they are building like crazy. And they typically pay good money. Okay. They build union and good quality workers, but you rarely have any issues with workers. Okay. And we thank you for that. Also, healthcare, they build union. Stanford, for the most part, they are good people. And then we're looking into building big things like high-speed rail and all those things, trying to create job opportunities, but with good paying jobs, not just job opportunities. Because if you want a job, you can come to my house and pay in my house for $3 an hour, but that's not a good job opportunity. Building BART, as I mentioned, we built a 49er stadium. They also built it with union labor. But to build these projects, and this is my job on the political side, that you have to keep developers on check, because otherwise they will go. They will come and build. They will exploit. If you leave developers unattended, just leave them on their own. They will come and exploit the workers, destroy the environment, and leave us with expensive homes. And they go to the next city and build and build and build. And Anthony talked a little bit about environmental justice. Elected officials, sometimes they want to build housing so much because we have a need for housing that they are willing to sacrifice the environment and the workers in the name of building homes. And we always go, no, why do you have to sacrifice the environment and the workers? Well, because the developer doesn't want to put so much, they want to make so much profit. Well, they don't have to make so much profit. And it's okay for the developer to make money, but they have to take care of the environment and the workers, but they don't do that.
My question is, these developers who exploit the workers, are they exposed to the general population?
They are, depending on how severe, like this, where the workers were exploited, we even have campaigns against it. TV stations have.
Okay. That's kind of what I meant.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's important that I live in Allen Rock. And from my house, I can see all the cranes. Mm-hmm. For years, I've seen the cranes. And, you know, it's exciting to see San Jose grow, because many years ago, they didn't want San Jose to grow.
It was totally,
yeah.
Nothing was happening.
And the fact that I can drive past maybe a site and realize that these guys are being taken advantage of, that's an issue. Mm-hmm. And I honestly think that at every new college, that this is something we really do need to make them aware of, because they may end up being developers themselves one day. And
actually, when I was at the building place, I worked with San Jose Evergreen, and they are building union colleges in every project out there. So I'm very glad. You mentioned you live on Allenbrook, and I also live on Allenbrook. The city of San Jose, because of BART coming in, now developers are looking at Allenbrook because they want to build near transit. And I just met with a community group yesterday, and what the developers are doing, well, through Allenbrook, if you guys, I think you've probably driven to Allenbrook, there's a lot of businesses, small businesses, mom and pop, local owned shops. Right. So developers are displacing these, and I just went to a meeting yesterday, they are displacing the small businesses. And now these small businesses, they don't know where are they going to go, because it takes a big investment to move and start, and you lose clientele and people that are used to going there, and the community is against it. But the city of San Jose, the elected officials are in favor of it. Not all of them, but so we are trying to partner with them so they can hire local people and somehow assist with financial incentives that displaced local businesses. Because where are they going to go? They are building housing and retail at the bottom, but the new retail, the lease is going to be very high, and they will not be able to afford the lease, and they will rent it to the Starbucks of the world, which they can afford, but the local tire shop isn't going to be able to do it there.
Something that I
so
noticed,
these are some of the social issues that Anthony was talking about.
something that sprung up on me. So Capitol, where they're Capitol and McKee, and Mayberry.
Oh yeah, yeah.
All right. Honestly, I go down there all the time. I never paid attention to this gigantic apartment complex that's coming up, and it's like almost done. And I'm like, when did they put that there? It was that quiet.
No, and they
It was
try
that
to.
quiet. I feel like, when did that get there, right? And I know if I head out to, like Berryessa, the Berryessa area, any place there's a VTA or bar, all apartments going on.
Well,
Warm Springs area.
I mentioned right now that at the free market, they are building the parking lot, but where the actual free market is, they are going to put 45,000 homes, 4,500 homes, plus office and retail. That's going to be massive. And like I said, when I attend those community meetings, our people, I live on the east side, people don't show up.
Yeah.
You say, hey, what are we going to get in return? And developers are saying, hey, good, we're making money here. So, yep. We mentioned that our workers get exploited, and Anthony touched on how, on top of not being paid wages, sometimes they ask us to do unsafe actions. Like in this case, I mean, that's pretty scary. My brother fell off the roof one time right in front of me, and it's pretty scary to see your brother looking down and see your brother laying on the floor, and you don't know if he's alive or dead or anything like that. Pretty scary. But Anthony mentioned when the miners back in the day, this is showing an asbestos worker. Asbestos used to be used in construction a lot. Now they don't use it, we just remove it. But you have to take classes, you have to be certified, you have to have a special protective equipment. Asbestos fibers is like a fishing hook. Like if you breathe any type of dust and you cough it up over the day, but because asbestos is a fishing hook, it hooks into your lung and you cannot cough it up. And right now, companies, especially in San Francisco, they are remodeling buildings, and they take the asbestos and they don't even tell the workers that they are removing asbestos. So, I mean, on top of not being paid, we are putting in dangerous situations as the asbestos fiber obviously amplified. When you remove asbestos, and I'm talking about asbestos, but it can be any chemical, you are supposed to take it to a special landfill so they can be put away and kept there. But no, companies don't tell anybody, and they take it to the regular landfill. And I forgot to mention this, over on Santa Clara Street by 24th or something like that, where the library is. I don't know if you guys know where the library is, and a little park right next to it. That was a landfill at some point. And the city built a park over it, and only to find out that kids were getting sick. And then they had to redo the park, take everything out, and do the park again. Now it's safe, but that's because contractors and developers take things that they're not supposed to the regular landfill. How do I know that? Because I used to do that. I was an undercover worker for companies, and they used to send me with asbestos removal to the landfill, and they will say, hey, just at that time, it was $20. Just give $20 to the guy at the entrance and he'll let you in. Sure enough, I gave the guy that $20. Yeah, come on in and dump the asbestos when the asbestos was supposed to be taken to somewhere in Southern California. So it happens every time. So you have to pay attention. I'll skip over that. Right now, because of all these things in my work experience and the scope of work of the organization, we are trying to ask, how am I doing on time, Forrest? We are going around city by city asking elected officials to adopt regulations to protect workers and to keep contractors that are part of the underground economy away from our area. We said, hey, if you have any tax evasion, workers' comp fraud, OSHA violations, wage theft violations, working with all these violations, you cannot work in this city. Go somewhere else. We don't want you here. Go back to Texas, South Carolina. So we are working with cities passing these laws. And you won't believe how hard it is. You will think that every elected official will say, yeah, every company has to pay taxes. Every company has to pay workers' compensation. Everybody has to. It's very hard. In some cases, one elected official, and I will not mention his name, but he was in 4 contractors. They have to pay all these things. And I'm thinking, what? But it is very challenging. The policy says that if a contractor is found guilty, they have to leave a job site within 24 hours. If we are successful at the end, and Forrest and Dennis, we have been working on this. This will be great, guys, because nobody will be exploited anymore in cities if we get adopted. This is the cities we are working for right now. But the next one is going to be Milpitas, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy, and I'm going city by city, and hopefully we'll get it done soon, sooner than later. And just for you guys to take away, and I will open it up for questions. Think about actual humans. I know we are building beautiful homes and beautiful buildings and everything, but think about people. That they are real people. They have families. They don't want to get sick. They want to be safe. They want to pay their rent. And they want to work just like the rest of us. They just want to make a decent living and go home. But as I said, some developers, some project managers don't think about it that way. They just want to make a profit and exploit people. So think about it that way. Thank you, guys. All right. Any questions, comments? I do have a card. You meant a credit card with my.
I'll take your credit card.
My little PIN number in the back. Any questions, guys? If you don't have a question, I'm gonna ask you questions. So you're gonna ask me questions. This is my question to you guys. What's the meaning of life? Well, thank you guys. If you guys don't have any questions or comments or any comments. Yeah, any comments too, yeah.
This is your one chance. You won't see Josue Garcia all the time. And this is an opportunity to really ask somebody some questions. So if you don't even have questions, just make up a question that you think you might want to have later on. Because Josue is really a wealth of information, actually very talented.
Dennis, please.
Josue used to have any good presentations on the political process, and how certain projects got entitlements, then got their permits later on, and projects got going, and why being involved in the politics side of it was so important early on, to where when the project actually finally happens and workers start going out to that job, that a lot of things, steps to protect those workers are in the first place. It's something that, I mean, you're talking to high school students now that probably maybe haven't been involved in that process or understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's something that's important for them to know.
Sure. Yeah, no, like I said, if I can divide construction in 2 parts, is the building of something, the actual constructing it, and then the political side, or I call it the political side, but it's called the entitlement process. Every time a project, whether you are changing something small at your house, you have to go to the city and get a permit. That's something small. But if you want to build something big, all the way from a house to a 22-story building, you have to go through the entitlement process. And the entitlement process is the political side. A developer has to go in and open up an application. The city looks at the application, and then they have community meetings just to tell the community, and they make presentations every night of the week. They said, hey, this developer is trying to build a hotel, a worker, a store, a mall, whatever it is. What do you guys think? What does the community think? And then the community shows up and they say, no, we don't want it because it's going to create a lot of traffic, more traffic. There's not enough parking. We already don't have enough parking as it is. The air quality is going to be too noisy and all those things. And the community pushes against these projects, and the developer pushes in favor of the projects. And then with the community feedback, the developer is supposed to go in and kind of implements the community's ideas. At the same time, the city starts what they call the environmental impact report. The project cannot impact wildlife, water, and air quality, traffic, and all these things. So the company, the developer hires engineers that measure traffic to see if traffic is going to be impacted. They study air quality, water. Are they going to kill some wildlife species, some birds? For example, they study things like, once this building is going to be this tall, how is that shadow going to impact the house next door? That actually gets studied. That shadow, they go, hey, I have a nice sun during the mornings, and now with this building, I'm not going to be able to have the sun. It's going to be dark all the time. For example, some developer wants to propose, and this is going to happen more and more. They want to have a restaurant at the top of the building, and the neighbors are saying, no, man, these guys are going to be partying all night and a lot of music, and we have to go to work the next day. Parking is an issue because the city of San Jose, to push us from using, to push us to use public transit, developers have to have like 2 cars per unit. Now they can only have 1.5 cars per unit, so we can drive more public transit. And now they are saying, no, now you just 1 car per unit. And now in some cases they are saying 0 cars per unit. Everybody has to use public transit. So the community thinks, hey, that's a good idea and a good goal, but nobody's going to follow that idea, and people are going to park in the streets, and there's no parking. All these issues. So the process starts, and then they have a planning commission meeting. The community can show up and push against it. And that's where we show up and also say, hey, you have to have labor standards. The developer has to protect the workers. And they push, no, if we put labor standards, they're not going to be able to build it. And then we go, well, this guy did it, how come you can do it? And then it gets to a city council. And at the city council meeting, the city council approves or denies the project. And guess what? All projects are approved, even with shady issues. In downtown San Jose, a developer proposed a project. And I mentioned that the developer has to get an environmental impact report, that the building is not going to impact the environment or people, wildlife, people, and all these things. And the city council has to, they do the report, and the city council has to certify it that it's correct, and the development is not going to impact the community and wildlife and these things. City council certify it. We hire an attorney that specializes on these things. They look at the report. They go, hey, this report has flaws. Why did you approve the city council if this thing is false? It has some holes in it. And they said, well, we are the city, we are experts, so we approved it. So we took him to court and we won. So the developer has to do another one and do what he needs to do to protect the environment. And in this case, there used to be a gas station there. And obviously the soil was contaminated. But the city looked the other way, and we brought him to justice, and now they have to do an environmental impact report. But you have to have people like us keeping an eye on these developers, because like I mentioned it earlier, if you leave them unattended, they will come and destroy the community. That covered, it's kind of complicated, but that's the entitlement process in construction. And everybody, and I encourage you to participate. Did you guys, I mentioned that I worked for the city of San Jose for a little bit. People don't get involved, but if you get very involved, if you get involved, you can make a difference. For example, this is something simple. You know that light that you always cross every morning? If you, by yourself, or even if you gather, if you bring us, all of us here, you can change the time that light turns to red from green, from 2 seconds to 4 seconds to 10 seconds to whatever. All we have to do is all of us go to city council and say, hey, you know what? This light takes too long or too short. I don't have enough time to cross us. As simple as that. You can do that. For example, well, a gentleman mentioned that he lives in Allen Rock, and I live in Allen Rock. When you exit Allen Rock, they used to, now when they did the rapid transit thing, they used to have a sign that said no turn on red or something like that. And I was one of them that pushed against it, and now they took the sign out. Now you can turn even when the light is red, because I was holding traffic a lot. If you go farther down to where the stop and go is, stop and go by the Starbucks on White and Allen Rock, a little bit farther. Yeah, right there. There's a little bit a left turn thing. That's because of me, because before that thing wasn't there. And so people were, if they wanted to turn, they were on the regular lane, and they were holding traffic all the way to 280. And so it was me. I even did some designs and took them to City Hall and recommended it. And they go, yeah, that's a good idea. And so I'm always pushing for good things. And yeah. And that's just me. Can you imagine if I show up with all of you behind me and say, hey, yeah, we support Josue's idea. We will get a lot of accomplished. Yeah. Yeah, so you can do a lot if you organize yourselves. Yeah.
I have a question. So following on the environmental impact report, and let's say a large institution is proposing a permit for a period of time that they're saying they're going to build. You know, say this could be Google or Facebook doing one of these large campuses. And right now, the prevailing argument that I've heard is that the law allows me to be blind to reality. Anything outside my property line, I don't have to, I can pretend like I don't impact anything. I only have to be concerned within my property. But of course, everybody says that's not real. If you have a major campus with tens of thousands of people, maybe, like, of course, that affects the surrounding area. And you should be part of the thought process of how do you develop that? And how do you make things make sense? Like I said, nobody thought about the turn lane, and now it's backing up traffic all the way to the highway. What do you think about that? About the responsibility of our captains of industry, maybe in these areas? What's their role in helping us solve?
Yeah, well, obviously, the bigger the company, the harder it is to push against. For example, you have the Amazons of the world and Googles and Facebooks. In Menlo Park, the community pushed against Facebook because the community wanted something out of it. Because they're in their minds, they just have to take care of their Section 8. I took care of the environmental impact report, but what happens on traffic and air quality, noise, and are you gonna need more fire department resources? Who's gonna pay for that? Police resources. You're gonna have more people coming in. Schools are gonna be impacted. And things that you don't think about, will always say, oh yeah, well, Google is coming, or Facebook, or whomever, that should be cool. But no, how are we gonna pay for fire, police, all these things, schools especially? We need to think about that. And there are organizations that work on those issues. And we don't even have to know a lot about it. We just partner with organizations that do these things and say, yeah, you know what, these guys are doing the studies for us.
This way, when developers come in and get these entitlements, they do it, maybe in a time when the economy is down and cities are wanting to develop, they'll take anybody to in, and they will get through these environmental impact reports or get through the entitlements, and they put these entitlements on the shelf. becomes, you know, advantageous for them to build, maybe 5 years, 10 years later, those entitlements are sitting on the shelf, they can go pull them and say, you know, we have already done all of the studies, we have approved this, now we'd like to build it. But things have changed over 5 to 10 years now. It's not the same, you know, same situation as it was. And is there any review of that entitlement to say, now you have to come back because you waited 5 to 10 years, you have a different situation?
No, and not only that, to add to that, sometimes they change what they proposed in the beginning, and then they want to use the same, well, this is a bad example, but just so I can make a point, like if you said, okay, I'm going to build a school, and I get the permits, and now I'm going to build a bar, drinking bar, and you go, well, that's not the same. But so sometimes they change the scope of work a lot, and they go, well, I already did got my approvals, and they go, yeah, but you got them to build a school, not to build whatever housing project. And they do that, and so that's why people like me, our job is to pay attention to those things, to say, hey, the approvals you got, they are too old. Traffic has changed, the population has changed, and different things. But yeah, they do that. They get approvals, and that's a good point. And it's because they get approvals, and then they say, no, right now building is too expensive. I have plenty of money to put them on the shelf, and I'll come back when things are more cheaper to build. And they do that very often. But if no one is paying attention, the city will let them do that. Sure. We have to. That's what my job is, to challenge these developers. As you know, I'm not very well liked by developers, so. That's what I do. Yeah. Any more questions, comments? Let me use this last 2 minutes to hopefully to inspire you. When I was telling you that when I came to the country, because I want you to take opportunities in construction to the fullest. I came out of financial necessity, and when I came to the country, there were no Home Depots in the area. But I used to stand in a corner just like the Home Depot workers do right now. You guys have seen those workers, right? In a corner, you say, hey, can you take me to go to work? So I used to do that, stand in a corner. But I always wanted a union job. So I went to one union. I was like, oh, I finally found where a union hall is. So I went and applied. And they asked me if I spoke English. I said, no, I don't speak English. Do you have a driver license? No, I don't have a driver license. Do you have a high school diploma? No, I don't have a high school diploma. Do you have this? No, I don't have any of that. And they said, well, come back when you do. I went to the second union, and you know what they asked me? Do you speak English? Do you have a driver license? Do you have a high school diploma? You have this? No, I don't. Well, go home and come back when you do. I went to the third union, and you know what they asked me? Speak English. I went to the fourth, to the fifth, and so on and so on. But at the end, I ended up representing 26 construction unions. The ones that wouldn't hire me when I didn't speak English and I didn't have any. So if you can picture me going from Home Depot to being the CEO of the Building Trades Council, that's pretty amazing. I think, in fact, I have a presentation that talks about that. It's called The Amazing Construction Industry. So the industry is full of opportunities. It's a universe of opportunities. I have had a lot of fun, and get into it and enjoy it. Thank you, guys.
I think everybody could imagine hopefully teaching a whole class, not just this lecture, expanding it out the whole, be the commercial development. And how do you do commercial development? How do you do the agreements with the public policy developers? Could you imagine anybody better teaching that class?
Yeah, because one of the things that I do, and Dennis used to do that with me, we negotiate big agreements with developers so we can build them with good labor. It's another skill that you have to have, build, negotiate agreements. In some cases, and don't say this, I don't even know how much that is, because I negotiate agreements, and Dennis has with me. They are like $1 billion. I don't know how much that is. I know what 5,000 is, $10,000 is, but $1 billion. I just negotiate the agreement without knowing how much that is. As you can imagine, I don't know how much is that $1 billion. I mean, I know what it is, but I've never seen him in a stack of papers. But no, it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Thursday night, 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock, Evergreen Valley College.
Evergreen Valley College. You know, I actually, you probably know Andres Quinteros.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, he's alumni trustee, and he used to teach up until recently at Evergreen College, and he would invite me to his class very often.
What class was it?
Political science.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So do the construction political science course.
Yeah.
They teach this class at Chico State, Stanford,
Yeah, no. Andres, I was one of his regular guest speakers to the class, and I will speak about the entitlement process in a more entitlement of different things, and how we get to where we are passing policies and all.
I'm going to start talking about banking.
Yeah, no, like I said, Andres used to invite me every time.
If she wants to put together a whole program, she has everybody around here she needs.
Well, especially on how these things happen, because the negotiations, the political side of the negotiations, and people. This is something. In fact, I always tell people that what I do, you don't go to school for it. You just learn it as you go.
With labor history involved.
With labor, right?
Because, knowing, things that have happened in flight taking place over the years to get legislation passed, get us where we're at, as far as the wage and benefits. It wasn't an easy fight.
No, a long fight too. Hard and long. Well, thank you guys. All right.
Quick comment. Professor, on this slide in the Tech Museum. Well, it was designed by Steinberg Architects. And we took a field trip to their office. Exactly. Henry was kind enough to give us a tour and stuff. And he showed us this sketches, this renditions about 3 years ago when we were working on it. So they got approved. Also, one more thing. Josue was mentioning a couple of buildings across the street from San Pedro Market. Well, about 4 years ago, somewhere around there, Josue got us access to a building that they were building there, which I just wanted to thank you. 4 years after the fact, he got us a field trip to, I think it was like a 20-story building they were building across the street. So my students went out there and they got to see the building in progress. Elevators we used at that time were the cages and stuff. Yeah, construction elevators. Yes. So I just wanted to thank you.
Yeah, that's in Terra project, Union Build.
Exactly. Yes, sir. You got correct.
So the students now at Team Iron, the high school students, Team College, here's the college team. Their job now is to take your lecture, and they're in the final 2 weeks of the class.
Oh, okay.
So they have this week and next week to now implement in their projects social justice. And yesterday was the first day they heard the word social, or Tuesday was the first time they heard the word social justice. They were working on this concept. So does everyone have a better idea now if they're looking this way?
I think for me, I feel like I've been aware and I've known this. I just never, like you said, gone to that, continues, I hear stories, and I mean, I need this injustice everywhere, not only in construction.
It's everywhere.
So, for me, it's just to know, I guess, a bit more. It's not surprising, but I didn't know that information. I've known this for a while. So.
Right. No, and everybody knows that is there, but I mean, that's not what we do for a living. And get busy with your own life. Normal.
So Team Iron has the challenge of how do they apply social justice to changing the energy consumption of this building. Roger's here from the east side, Roger's part of the building. Looking at the buildings, so they built a BIM, they're doing an energy analysis of this building? Do they have skylights? Do they change
Mm-hmm.
here? Do they change the lights in here? But what does that do for social justice? Well, you know, does that?
No, and you know what? I think Dennis gave you more material. What do you do with the solar panels after that?
One other thing that we're starting to data project is we're looking at what school districts pay for energy, you know, per square foot. And right now, just the information coming in and we're gathering, there's already a discrepancy from what east side pays for energy versus the west side. So, for example, east side pays roughly 90 cents a square foot for electricity, while the west side is paying about 78 cents a square foot. You get into more affluent areas like Campbell, they pay 48 cents.
Oh.
So you know, see this is your education. You know,
I didn't even know that.
So they start to develop together the project.
Oh, yeah. And you know that money comes to the students, I mean, or it's not directed to the students.
Yeah, so that energy comes directly out of the general fund, so it doesn't have an impact on teacher salaries.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
As I get more data, we'll include a portion of our social justice.
That's good information, though. That's great information.
How we pay more. It's a double tax on us. So it's Team Iron's job to come up with.
We're paying double.
Yeah.
Paying double.